to Future Role Model, a podcast that praises the unconventional and redefines what it means to be a role model because, you know, we're not perfect and we like that. Guest today is Jon Huck.
Hello. Jon
Huck is, man, it's funny because you're kind of one of the first people that I met as a comedian in Hollywood.
But that was that, and then you still moved out here? And you're still like, oh yeah, that looks fun.
I remember that story. Like, we just reconnected at the Improv last week and we were playing in Brea. And Jon and I were talking about the time that we met before I had moved to LA, and there was some party that had happened and your friend was like, she's not going to stay in LA, right?
Well, yeah, we were at 3 clubs, Brian Swinehard's show.
Yeah.
And you, I think your boyfriend, you had friends with you. You had, I don't know if they were LA friends or you had some other female friends with you.
Yeah.
And there was probably a Tuesday night because that was when Brian had his shows at 3 clubs. And those shows were always a lot of fun. But like, we did those shows for so long, we got real comfortable there. Like, it became like, this is our living room. Like, we just went there and there's a lot of, like, at one point I was waiting to go up one night and I leaned over to somebody and go, when am I going up? And they were like, dude, you went up like a half hour ago. And I was like, what? And like, it was like that kind of time in my life and like in that place at that time. And you were visiting and you came to the bar and you're like, oh, hey, good show or whatever. And I was like, oh, thanks. And I think you mentioned you were from Chicago. I think that came up. Either I had a Cubs hat on or it came up in somehow it came up. And I was like, oh, really? And you're like, yeah, I'm thinking about moving out here. I was like, oh, you should come over. Me and my buddy are going to keep drinking. And you're like, okay. So you guys all came over. And I mean, I was already
I remember that house too, because we were in the backyard for most of the night, right?
I had a big hammock back there and like fake AstroTurf grass.
And I'm obsessed with hammocks. And so I remember it was so cool. But yeah, we definitely got all sorts of
I threw up in the bushes and my buddy was like, that chick's never going to move to LA now. And I was like, I don't think I stopped her from making any important life decisions.
Yeah, I feel like I also had you, because I used to run that show at Rush Street. Didn't I have you on that?
In Chicago?
No, here.
Oh.
In Culver City.
Yes, upstairs, right?
I only knew like 10 comics in LA at that point.
Yeah.
I was running a show and still living in Chicago. I was bartending in Chicago.
Yeah.
And the owner of this bar was like, oh, you're going out to LA for shows? You think you might move there? Well, I should connect you to my friend who owns this bar. It's a Chicago bar. So he was like...
I mean, Rush Street. That's why I was like...
Right. Yeah. And the bar that I worked at in Chicago was on Rush Street. So ironically, but not ironically.
Coincidentally.
Yeah, that's the right word. I don't fucking know what words mean.
Fair enough.
But yeah, so I had a show that I ran at Rush Street and my friend Dave Cavalier is a musician. And so I used to pick up his equipment from his storage unit and like take it over to Rush Street and... in my rental car. Run a show like on the fucking roof.
Yeah, it was I felt like we were upstairs in like
on some patio.
Was it a patio? I remember like, were people sitting on the floor?
Yes. I mean, there was barely seating. And,
I do remember that though.
But people came, like 20,
yeah, it was crowded.
20 people would come and it felt like there was good bodies in there. And it was like...
Yeah, I don't think I did well.
I don't think, yeah.
I don't remember doing well.
I don't think I did either because I was pretty like young as a comic at that point.
Yeah, you were just, you had just moved here when you were running that show, right?
I hadn't even moved here yet. I was just coming out from Chicago. Like that was my foot in the door to meet all the LA comics.
You were just coming out here to run the show?
I was coming out once a month because I had my monthly at Comedy Store.
Holy shit, I did not realize that you didn't live. I thought you moved here like a little bit before that.
Yeah, no, so here's what happened. In Chicago, one of my good guy friends was a comic and a flight attendant.
Oh, sweet.
And he didn't date anybody, so he gave me his like flight pass, you know, the one that you get to jump seat for $50 or whatever it is. So I got to fly wherever the fuck I wanted. And so when I was in Chicago,
that's nice.
I knew I was going to move to LA or New York. So every other month I went to LA and New York for like 5 months, and did a bunch of shows in New York, a bunch of shows in LA, and I liked LA better for the industry. And then I just started coming out once a month and doing my Comedy Store show and the Rush Street show. So I had 2 shows that I ran, and that's how I got to know comics.
Yeah, wow.
That's how I got to meet you. So that Rush Street show, that's where I got my first get out of jail free card. I got pulled over for drunk driving leaving that show in Culver City, but I got a new cop who was in training. and they were basically using me as a test. And so they let me go.
Wow. They failed that test.
Crazy. And at the end of it, they had me blow. Once they already released me because my friend was sober, they had me blow, and I was almost double.
Holy shit.
I didn't even think I was fucked up. But we took,
But you're coming from Chicago, so you're like, whatever, dude, I can keep one eye open. I'm fine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
People can drink way too much in Chicago. So that's how we first connected, because you came from Chicago, but you didn't start comedy in Chicago.
Right. I came out from the suburbs. Basically, I lived in like Naperville. Well, I'm from Warrenville, which no one knows where that is. So I say Naperville, which some people, Wall Street Journal.
You round up.
Yeah. And actually, Naperville is now the second largest city in Illinois. It's like almost as big as Chicago. But yeah, so I lived there, born and raised, 18 years old, went to college in northern Wisconsin, lived out in D.C. for a month and a half, and then moved back to Illinois. And then from there in 99, I moved out to L.A.
Oh, God, you've been out here since 99?
I got out here November 3rd, 1999, because I was like, if the world is going to end from Y2K, I don't want to be here. I'd rather be in Los Angeles. And I had a buddy moving out at the same time, and we moved out with, absolutely nothing. I had to borrow $600 in Montana just to make it to the rest of the...
From whom?
A buddy.
Oh, okay.
Of mine, yeah.
I was like, just a random person at a bar.
Hey, man, can I get $600? Sure, this is Montana. We hand out money.
Dude, I was like, I could go to Montana and make some money like this weekend.
If I can make $600, you could do probably $650, $700.
Weirdly enough, I got on a Google tangent last night because I was looking up like different... there's different things you can invest your money in online, and I was just kind of Googling about that stuff.
Yeah.
And I found somebody's like Reddit post where they were like, I need to make $10,000 in 24 hours. I want to do this 3 or 4 times a year. That way I only have to work 4 days a year. I don't care how illegal it is. And I was reading all the comments, and it was the funniest fucking chain of stuff I've ever read.
I can only assume that person posted that to read the comments. Like,
he did.
Not like, oh man, I hope someone gives me an idea and I'm actually gonna go do this.
Well, people would comment on what he could do to make $10,000, and he would break it down mathematically. He'd be like, well, if I have to kill a hooker, then I would have to have sex with 7.2 hookers, and I'd have to murder this many hookers a night in order to, like, he broke it down mathematically. And I was like, this is a guy who really understands how to make 10 grand illegally.
Yeah, yeah. And what he'd have to do and how he'd have to sell his soul.
So I'm just going to post on his thing, Montana, dude.
Dude, go there. They're handing out money. And if they're handing out $600 in 1999, imagine what it is now.
So how did you end up getting into comedy in the first place? Did you start right away then in 99?
No, I lived out here. Me and my buddy lived in some... My buddy was about my age. I was like 24 at the time, 23, 22, 23 maybe. And then our place to live fell through right before we moved out, so we had nowhere to live. So I was like, well, I'll just live in my car if I have to.
Which happens all the time to people in LA.
Yeah, yeah.
Like always.
And my buddy was like, well, my uncle he's a director out here. He's directed a couple of really solid things. The movie Hype, which won a couple of things at Sundance, Scratch, like documentaries, essentially. But he was like, my uncle has a friend who, they went to college in Colorado. His uncle was 40 at the time, or thereabouts. And his friend was like the same age. And his friend had a brother working in TV and was just kind of trying to make ends meet. But he had a room for rent at this apartment right across near Dodger Stadium.
Oh, wow. Like way down there.
Yeah, exactly. And in 1999, it wasn't as nice as it is now, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
But this guy let two 24-year-olds live in a room in his apartment, and like every day you could just see him getting like more angry. Like we would just get super drunk, smoke cigarettes out. He had this little deck that wasn't even a deck. It was just like a piece of wood with no railings, like over 30 feet over a cactus patch on the side of this hill. And we'd be out there every night like, woo, Los Angeles. And we were just, me and my buddy were just having a good time. Like there was no plans. My buddy was like, I think I'm going to try to get into art department on a TV show. And I'm like, well, what do you do in the art department? He's like, well, if we're like set dressers, we'll just move stuff around. I go, I can move stuff around. Like I want to do that. And I didn't know how to get into the entertainment industry. And he started working at Nickelodeon through a friend. I don't know how the fuck he got in there, but from that.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I was just working temp work. I was walking downtown because my car that I was going to live in broke down. I was walking downtown and working at like an insurance company to do temp work or whatever.
Oh my gosh.
And then before I took a job as an underwriter, I almost took like a full-time insurance gig, and my buddy was like, hey, I got this job with the U.S. Comedy Arts Festival. Do you want to drive a van full of gear out to Aspen, Colorado, and then hang out for 2 weeks and drive A-list talent around to shows? And I go, what? Yeah, man. Yeah, I want to do that. He goes, it's basically a week-long party. I go, yeah, I'm in. So I left the insurance company and I took that job as a production assistant driving gear out to Colorado. And from that, I had sort of started stand-up a little bit before that, but like my mom was like, what are you doing out there? And I was like, I don't know. I'm just living out here.
You're like, it's sunshine?
Yeah, I'm just like not freezing to death. I'm not living on someone's floor. Like, but it was like just it was Los Angeles.
Feels different.
Yes, it felt different.
It feels more productive.
But it didn't.
Even though it's not.
It wasn't, because I wasn't doing anything. I was just like drinking and then like going to work and like, so she suggested stand up. And I was like, you're crazy. You don't just go on
your mom
stage.
did.
She was like, why don't you go on stage and tell jokes? You're funny. And I was like, you're an idiot. Like, you can't go out, just go on stage and tell jokes. What are you, a crazy person? And then like I hung up and I like, well, I picked up an LA Weekly because this was pretty much before the internet was what it is. Like it was there, but it wasn't an information superhighway. It was
because we were about to hit Y2K.
Yeah,
so.
it was ad pop-ups and blocks and all that crap. And I just started looking at the LA Weekly for open mics, and then I found a couple, and I blacked out before the first time I tried to go on stage, and I started heckling, and my buddy just dragged me out of there and took me home. He was
my
like,
God.
You're a piece of shit. And I was like, well, what? I have no recollection of that. I would love to know the comic on stage when I did that, and obviously buy them dinner or hug them or whatever. But
they probably quit after that night.
No, actually, she said to me, it was a woman, and she, as I said something, and she goes, sir, are you looking for Betty Ford? It's out the door and to the left. Like, it was like she's just sending me to rehab, and everybody was laughing at me. I was like, yeah, I deserve that. But so I just started going up at the Haha. I would take a bus from Echo Park. I would take 3 buses from Echo Park to the Haha Cafe in North Hollywood, because I didn't realize at the time that people also ran shows out of coffee shops and out of bars and living rooms and laundromats and
everywhere.
wherever. So then I just started going up at the Haha and I had my first time on stage. I got a couple of laughs, and I was like, oh, I'm a natural. I'm gonna go pro, and I really enjoyed it. And then the second couple times on stage, I ate it real bad.
That's how it goes for everyone. I feel like.
Yep,
where
you always get that beginner's luck, and then you're like, "Ooh, I'm a comic," and then you're like, "Oh my God, no, I'm an idiot."
Yeah. Yep.
But the difference is people who go through that tragic bombing and then continue.
Right.
Like, I know a lot of people who've had that real bad set, and they're like, "Well, I've proved that I could do comedy." I'm like, "Oh, is that what you proved?"
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, you've also proved that you quit when it doesn't go your way.
Yeah, exactly. Which is a lot of people, and then they move on and do something else. It's not like it just turns out comedy probably wasn't for them, and that
right.
and accepting that kind of rejection to your face. Like, when you're not doing well, there's not a letter. They're not calling you the next day and telling you. They're telling you right then and there, without laughing, in silence, that you're terrible at what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it can be rough.
I still remember my biggest couple of bombs and how brutally painful they were. One of them was on the road with Mike Stanley. Do you know who Mike Stanley is?
I know that
comic
name.
Out of Chicago, but he like started in Detroit, and he was kind enough to take me on the road with him on a couple gigs, like, years. This was like 4 or 5 years ago, just so I could get some road.
Would you say before you were ready?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before I was ready to feature on the road?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You were doing full 25?
I was doing full 25, 30.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a full 25, 30. I had 25 stretchable 25.
You had a nice 12 that you could, like, if you really hemmed and hawed and took your time and did some crowd work.
It would have been perfect for, like, it was perfect for younger crowds. Like, when we played, like, Chattanooga, Tennessee, it was, like, awesome. I did just fine. But we had this one show that was in Decatur, Illinois, that I still have nightmares about.
You wake up, Decatur.
It was Decatur. I don't know what is growing there, but it smells so bad. And as somebody told me it's soy, and I can't imagine how soy could smell so bad. It's like putrid. And
Sounds about right.
So Decatur not only smells bad, I wanted to get out into Decatur and get to know what the city was, because you like to do that when you're
when you're at places that deserve that.
Yeah. And I went on stage, and it was all like the oldest people in the world, and they were like, "Yeah, we're in the Bible Belt, by the way." And this was when all my material was like filthy. So I ate shit for 25 minutes. And I don't know if anyone has ever eaten shit for 25 minutes straight, but it hurts.
It doesn't go down good. It's not smooth.
Pain. Actual, like I was sweating.
I was going to say, first of all, I sweat all the time, but when I'm eating it, like it's like you then notice like, oh, it's running down the back of my neck like a river. Like, oh God, like it's, yeah.
And your mouth dries out. And like when I got off stage, Mike was like, Natasha, you know you can just get off early if you need. And I was like, I didn't think I could.
See,
I didn't think I could do it.
I think it shows more professionalism. Because I had that once. I had complete silence for 30 minutes featuring for somebody I'd never met before on a one-nighter in like outside of Ashland, Oregon somewhere. And I had friends come to the show, these two girls I went to college with, and they sat in the back. And I'm telling you, 30 minutes of silence. I was doing my material that had worked the night before and nothing. And I had a conversation with one lady who was like a Chicago fan. And I was like, oh, you like the Bears? Talked to her. Total silence. 30 minutes. I remember like looking at the timer and being like, and I can get off now. And I go, all right, goodbye, everybody. And I go back and I looked at the headline. I go, hey, man, I'm real sorry. He goes, you're sorry? For what? And I go, for eating my own dick up there. And he was like, no, dude, at least you stayed up there. Because if you don't do that time, I have to do that time.
Yeah.
Because that's how that place worked. And it was like, dude, you did me a solid.
The whole amount of time.
And I go, well, no matter what you do, you'll get laughs because just make fun of me, you know? And he did okay. He was fine. But those two girls were like, oh, so this is what you've chosen to try to do for a living?
Yeah.
Cool.
It's so awful. I mean, the early stages of comedy, when I try to explain to people just how much you have to go through to just not quit, it's like pretty epic. To people in the Midwest who don't get it, they're like, oh, you're just killing it out there in the comedy world. I'm like,
oh, all they have to do is see you on TV one time. You could be walking in the background of something and they'd be like, oh, well, you're famous. So do you have a mansion yet?
Yeah.
You're like,
they think you just have bags of money. So you got into stand-up. Did you consistently keep doing shows for a while, or?
Yeah, I would say once I started doing it, I got really into it. And then, you know, just a couple of decent sets. And then one guy, like I would go to this open mic and like 4 or 5 times in, they tried to charge me $5. And they were like, you got to pay $5. And I go, no, I'm going up. And they're like, yeah, but you got to pay $5. I go, I'm not going to pay you to perform. Like I'm performing for free. Like, why would I give you money? Like, what are you talking about? Like, I'm buying beers at your bar. You know, what? And then that happened one time, and I wouldn't pay the $5. And then I went back the next week, and the owner basically was like, yeah, no, he can go up. And I was like, okay. And then they were like,
was that it? Haha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then Jack and this other guy were like, I had a couple of sets where people like laughed at some stuff at my open mic. And Jack was like, do you want to come back and do a regular show? And I go, yeah. Of course. Well, that's why I was asking. I'm a pro at this already. This guy's, this is easy. He booked me on a Saturday night. I bring my friends, like 40 people come out to see me because I was working in production at the time. Yeah. And these people are always like, oh, you're doing comedy, huh? And I was always trying to be funny at work and funny on location. And so they were like, oh, yeah, I'll go see you do comedy. Obviously, fucking around at work and like telling jokes on stage are two very different things.
Oh, yeah. 100%.
Yeah. You can only make fun of people you like and know in front of other people who know that person.
Right.
You can't do it on stage. They don't know. So they all showed up. I get out of the car. I look at the marquee. It's Latino Comedy All-Star Night. I'm like the only white dude on the bill. And I was like, oh, okay, which didn't faze me at first because I didn't think there'd be anything different about any audience. I just thought comedy audiences are comedy audiences. I didn't know.
Right.
This is a completely Latino crowd. It was like some friends of mine from work, the 40 people in the back, like those were white and black people.
Yeah.
And the rest were Latino. And I had one joke I opened up. I go, I bet you're wondering why Chris Elliott was booked on Latino Comedy All-Star. Right. And then one lady yelled out, what did she say? Something like, you're stupid. And I just go, Mom? And then that got a laugh. And then they left me up there for 15 minutes. I had never done more than 3.5 minutes of material.
Oh,
they left me up there for 15 minutes. But the worst part about it was that they, instead of putting me on at 8 o'clock when the show started, they didn't put me on until 11:30 So a lot of my friends
Everyone was
had
just
to leave.
toast. Oh, my
Everyone was
God.
sick of comedy. Plus, this is back when I didn't know how to function without alcohol. So as soon as I got into the club, I got there a little bit late. It was almost 8 o'clock. I pounded 3 or 4 beers immediately. And then they're like, well, you're going to go on in like 10 minutes. In that 10 minutes, I drank another 2 beers.
Yeah.
It'll be 20 minutes. In that 20 minutes, I drank 4 beers.
Yep.
This 11:30, they're like, okay, go on stage. I'm like, bleh. I'm teetering on blacking out and like forgot everything I wanted to talk about. Didn't have any notes with me. I was just up there going, like there's a recording of it somewhere. My buddy recorded it. And basically all you can hear is me talking and then my friend going,
Oh no. Oh no.
oh man. But afterwards, he said my buddy Tim, who a guy I moved out here with, came out. I went outside and smoked a cigarette. I was like, oh, what is wrong with me? I suck at this. And he came out and was like, dude, yeah, at least that's over with, right? And I thought he meant like, well, at least comedy's over. And I was like, well, I guess, man. I might try it again. He's like, no, I mean what you just did up there. You'll never be that bad again.
Right.
That's done. You're done. You'll never be. That is the worst.
Can only go up from here.
That is the worst you could ever be.
Yeah.
And I was like, I thought about that and I was like, you know what? And then when you start researching it and like looking into it and reading people's biographies, everybody sucks.
Well, and you need to. Like, there's no other way to be humbled in this business if you don't fucking suck like a lot of the time. I've done so many dumb, like even just looking back on the old YouTube sketches I used to do like 10 years ago when YouTube wasn't even a thing yet. I had to recently go on and like have YouTube scrubbed and like tell people, like call up old clubs and be like, take down that shit that's been up there for 8 years that people are still watching. And they're still like sending me a message. Oh, I watch your YouTube on. I'm like, what do you You're watching my oldest set ever. Like, stop watching that stuff.
Yeah. Part of you is like, well, at least it's not the new stuff I'm doing. And the other part is like, but people are going to think that's how good I am right now.
I know. They're going to think it's current. And it's just like, fuck.
Yeah.
So, which is hard to scrub YouTube because things just don't die, but like
can't kill the internet, baby.
Can't kill the internet. But yeah, so when you moved out here, you did that festival. Did that inspire you in any way?
Yeah,
like
it was
driving
awesome.
all those
I was like, oh, comedians just get to drive around in vans and do drugs and drink booze and get laid? Like, yeah.
I mean, that's fucking awesome. Who were the A-listers that you were driving around?
I worked that festival 3 or 4 years in a row, and the most impressive people I ever had in my van, I had Steve Martin I drove around.
Oh, wow.
And I said, sir, I just want you to know I'm going the long way because there's construction in town. He goes, yeah, man, do whatever you need to do. And I go, oh, I didn't want you to think I was an idiot. I didn't want you to make fun of me. And he was holding a newspaper. He goes, oh, I would never make fun of you. And then he holds the newspaper up, and as the newspaper was coming up, he goes, to your face. And then he just like the newspaper goes all the way up. And I just kept looking at him. I go, I'll take it. And then I just drove off. I had Dick Gregory in the van. That was nice.
Oh, sweet.
And then I got a call to pick up George Carlin, and I get to behind the Wheeler Opera House. It's icy. It was in February. So it was snowy and icy. And essentially we were there to drive people so they didn't slip and fall. And I see Carlin coming out, and my buddy comes out of nowhere and cuts in front of me in his van, and he takes the ride. I get out of the car, I'm looking at him, and then I look over at Carlin, and Carlin almost slips. And then he looks at me, like makes direct eye contact. He goes, "Ooh, watch out for the fucking ice, buddy." And I go, yeah, I will. And then he just got in the car, and I was like, I called my dad. I was like, I just talked to George Carlin. And I was like, hey, you talked to George Carlin. That's awesome. I mean, that way. And as far as like, but then there's guys like I had Sean Rouse in my van. I mean, Stanhope was up there. Nick Swartzen was running around up there. Like there's just a lot of, I mean, the list is long, and I couldn't even begin to remember because part of what I did there was just party. Yeah. And then by the last time I was going back, I tried doing stand up at like an off thing, like a side piano bar was that whatever. And I did some stand up, and that didn't go well. People were throwing napkins at me and shit. But yeah, that was inspiring in the sense that one year I was like comedy, and the next year I was like, I think like stand up seemed to be the most miserable when they would get into a van after a show. I just want to go back to the hotel. Like people didn't want to like go out or anything. Whereas like the sketch guys that were up there, all the sketch people were like, woo! Yeah. Like Rachel Dratch and Tina Fey were up there one year, and they were hilarious in the car. And there was just the sketch people just seemed. So I was like, oh, maybe I need to get into it, because the comedy thing didn't look fun at the time. It just looked miserable. Whereas the sketch people were like amped up, and it turns out it's just a different energy of people. It is. Well, and I didn't fit. It's a more like, because I started in the improv and sketch world at Second City. Nice. And
at first I thought I would never touch stand-up. And I told you the Brian Swinehart story and how I got into stand-up.
Swinehart influencing people one at a time.
Swinehart, not paying tabs and getting people into comedy. But I thought the same thing because the energy of the improv, I never got nervous before shows because you always had people on stage with you.
Fall back. It's like, to me, it was like being in a band. Like if you missed a cue, there's someone who's going to pick it up for you, and
or
not
you're
going to be
tired,
mad.
or you're off. Like, you know, when you're up on there by yourself, like sometimes, you know, even now, like I'll land in New York at like 5 p.m. and have to do my first show at 7 and then have 2 more. And sometimes you're just fucking tired. And sometimes you do just want to drink, you know, and then I had my first like drunk show in a very long time in New York. It was like a midnight show. It was a couple weeks ago at some like random underground stage. And it was like everybody was high. The whole place was just full of weed. And I was like, I don't even care. I'm going to get drunk before this show. I don't get drunk before shows really anymore.
Yeah, no.
But I was like,
every once in a while,
I'm going to do it.
It doesn't matter. At a certain point, you're like,
doesn't matter.
Who cares? Yeah.
I was like, it's Saturday and I want to just fucking get drunk.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I used to drink. I mean, I know you were talking about blacking out before shows and stuff, but I used to like only black out before shows when I first started stand up.
Yeah.
Did you do that a lot too?
I mean, I thought I needed the alcohol to go on stage to be funny. I mean, that's what, you know, people found funny in high school. That's what people found funny in college. It was like we would be at parties, we'd be drinking. So this is who I am. I drink beers. Look at me. And then in like 2007, I was like, if I didn't drink, I bet I could get better at this. Yeah. And then like,
well, because you remember what you do, you're smarter.
I remember the improv show I did, the Hollywood Improv, that like my first show, like pretty much bone sober, and I had the best time, and the audience was having a great time, and I stopped in the middle of it and I go, "See, isn't this better?" And they're all kind of like, "What?" I go, as much as it would be fun to watch me stumble around on stage and possibly fall off to my death, me remembering things and finishing jokes, that's better, isn't it? And they were like, yeah. They all like, it was like a sign. And it wasn't like these people had seen me a bunch of times, but they like understood what I was saying. Yeah. And they're like, dude, yeah, this is better than whatever that thing was you just described. Yeah. And that's all it really took. And I was like, and also as I got older, I don't want to be the guy who clubs are like, ugh, this guy over here with his fucking $900 tab, you know? Yeah, exactly. I have like a 2 beer rule. Like like throughout a show that I'm performing on, I will have like 2 beers maybe, you know, and that's it. And then after the show is when I'll drink down. I mean, I'll every once in a great while, if I'm really feeling uptight for whatever reason, I'll do a shot of whiskey. Yeah. Just one shot, boom, kind of gets me.
Jameson just fixes a lot of things.
Yeah. It's not bad.
So we were talking in the back before the podcast started about you and some of your first jobs that you had to like get by out here. And you worked in production starting when you were 24.
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty quick. The Aspen thing turned out to be a lot of production beforehand. Like I would work as a production assistant, the lowest
and prep for it
level, and prep for the festival, help them prep, and then kind of move over to the transportation department when the festival started. And then my buddy stopped taking PA gigs. My roommate, who originally got into it, wanted to advance and move up. And he's like, I don't want to be a production assistant anymore. I'm going to be a production manager, a production supervisor. And so I was like, okay. And so everything that he got calls for, he goes, no, but my roommate, John, is a production assistant. And I mean, honestly, I have him to thank for a lot of that, because he would have definitely gone to Costa Rica instead of me for Temptation Island too. Yeah. But I went, and from that met a guy who got me on another show at that company. But Temptation Island 2 is where I met a good friend of mine who ended up, when we were all set to do another show shortly after that, and 9/11 happened. And it was going to be a show where we travel to Scotland, live in a castle, and then as a production crew, we'd be in this castle while the cast, sort of like a reality show, the cast would have to live there and do whatever.
Yeah. They're recasting something exactly like that currently right now.
That doesn't surprise me.
Somebody just sent me like a thing for it. They're like, you want to go live in a castle? I was like, no, and I don't do reality.
I remember thinking like, man, that looks like a dumb show, but man, would I love to go to Scotland for free and like, hang out on a giant castle and do whatever. You know what I mean? It was just the traveling is what I really enjoyed about that. Yeah, that of course. Lineup. But because it was a traveling show and involved flights and everything, that was the kibosh went onto that like September 13th, 2001. You know what I mean? That was done. And then we were out of work. Like I was out of work for a long time, and I was running out of money, and it was getting pretty brutal. And my buddy out of nowhere was like, "Hey, I think I got a job on this new show. It's a hidden camera show." And all I had to reference that was Candid Camera at the time. I was like, "Oh, like Candid Camera?" And he's like, "Yeah, kind of like that." And I go, "Okay," but with this guy from Scream, and I'm like, "Okay."
What?
Jamie Kennedy.
Oh yeah.
So Jamie Kennedy had the Jamie Kennedy Experiment, which was which to me is still one of the funnest jobs I had as a PA. My duties were minimal. So I basically like showed up hungover, got high at work, ran around, did whatever. As long as I made sure everyone had coffee and the food was getting set up, and you know what I mean. And Jamie was funny and a good guy and fun to be around. You know, he was nice to everybody on the crew. There wasn't like this, well, he's the star. You have to, you know, it was none of that. So it was just fun. And from that, like season 2.5 of Jamie Kennedy, some friends of mine who I'd become the key PA, the PA in charge, whatever.
Yeah, the top of the bottom,
the top scumbag. And three people I knew went over to MTV because they were starting a new hidden camera show, and these three people were like, "Hey, we should bring this guy. He sort of knows what's going on."
Punked?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So then they took me. They called me and asked me if I want to be an associate producer. And I go, "Yeah, I don't know what that means." And they go, "Well, for starters, it pays twice what you're making now." I go, "Well, then,
like, great, I can do it.
I'm definitely in." And it turns out most production, and this isn't to belittle anything or to kind of poke fun at it, but a lot of what goes on in Hollywood is you need common sense.
Yeah.
And if you have common sense and you have decision-making skills and you're able to make rational decisions in a timely manner, you can succeed in production. Yeah.
Well, there's so many different like types of production.
Yes,
like,
that's true too.
I have worked in a lot over the years because when I first moved out to LA, I knew I wanted to be business savvy, and I didn't know what that meant. So I started meeting people that were like, you know, in movies that I was cast small roles in. I was like, "Hey, the rest of the weekends that I'm not working on set, can I just come and hang out and help out?"
See what goes on.
And I did. And that's how I got a lot of the great connections I have now, because they've all moved on to be executive producers and showrunners and all that stuff.
And that was super smart of you.
Yeah. I mean, and it's good. Again, it's a good humbling experience because PA work is not glamorous. Like,
no, but without it, productions would crumble.
Exactly. Because all like hashtag set life posts, half the time you're like fucking not doing anything. Like those posts make me laugh because it's like
they make me laugh because we didn't have Instagram when we worked, and if we did, and I was in charge of something, and I saw people taking pictures of themselves, I'd go, "Hey, get back to fucking work, or else do what everybody does: go hide out of sight."
Yeah,
like don't be where I can see you fucking off.
Don't
go
be visible.
Fuck off somewhere else.
Well, and I always tell people that want to get into production, because I've had different meetings with people that are like, "How did you start a production company? How did you do this or do that?" And I was like, honestly, nobody really knows what they're doing. You just do it and you figure it out as you go.
You're like, "Oops, I started a company."
Every fucking thing you do is so different. You know, people are like, "How do you pitch a show?" I'm like, one show to the next show is all different.
It's all different. Depends on what network, who you're pitching to. I mean, there's certain guidelines, you know.
Kind of, yeah. But like with production stuff, I always tell people you have to have mom brain. Like basically, you think of what could go wrong and how it could be solved.
You try to protect yourself against all that.
Yeah, and if you can think ahead, then you can definitely work in production, because you just basically have to like be prepared for shit to go wrong and have lots of tape on you.
Yeah, and mom brain is a good term, because in a sense, like especially the production end, like once you become a producer, like depending on the show, you have a little bit more freedom. You have a little bit more, you're making sure that other people are doing their thing. But in that like production management, production coordinator world, PA, all that, like that is like multitasking at its craziest.
Yeah.
Like, you've got to like every insurance certificate, every location permit, just so much paperwork.
So much stuff to keep track of.
That it's like keeping track of like 90 kids.
And like lunches and stuff, because you get like in major trouble.
And where to set up, and why are we by a garbage can again? And
exactly. Yeah. So when you started doing production and you were doing comedy, did you ever have a point where you thought, okay, maybe I can write and sell shows now that I know the two sides of this?
I started like sort of submitting ideas and thinking about different, like when I produced on Punk'd, I wasn't a writer on the show, so the bits would come to me, and then I like writers sat in a room, they figured stuff out. Then the executive producer would okay what they had, and then someone would put it on my desk and say, "We want to do this to this person. Let's figure it out." And then, then you figure it out. I did, through producing stuff like that, if I had an idea, I don't think it was a lot of the time, but if I was like, "Hey, what if you guys did this too?" Oh yeah, that's great. Throw that in. So I worked on Punk for the entire like first run of it, like 8 cycles or whatever MTV did.
Which was how over the course of how many years?
It was 4 or 5 years. And
okay,
then, and
they
then
really pack it in.
Yeah, they do two cycles a year, and then within that, we took an extended break and did another show called You've Got a Friend and another show called Room 401, and then I did NBC's Real Wedding Crashers with them too.
Oh yeah.
So that was like all Ashton's company at the time, Catalyst, I think was and I was with that company for a long time, and all the hidden camera we did, I got good at it, or it became an aspect of production that I completely understood, and I knew that if someone had never produced hidden camera, there are things that I would know that they wouldn't know.
Of course, yeah.
So I was like, I bet I could sell a hidden camera show, or we could come up with a hidden camera show. But I became like hidden camera isn't really my style of comedy. Like,
right.
I'm not a prank guy. I don't want to pull a prank on you. I don't want pranks pulled on me. I don't want to be filmed without my knowledge. I don't want, you know, there's a lot of stuff that just didn't appeal to me. And it was so funny because I was just pigeonholed. No one was going to hire me to produce anything else. It was always going to be hidden camera. And I was like, and I really don't, and it's not my thing. It's not really my thing. So after a while, I was just like, I just want to try to act. But Punk'd gave me a chance. I got on a couple of episodes. You know, I was able to be on the
You got to probably meet agents and stuff.
Not, you know what? Not as much as you would think. It was more about getting my confidence up and just being like, yeah, I can do this. You know, like because when you're going live, it's intense. Like especially if you're playing a character that you have to sell. Like I have to be an undercover cop. Like come on, I don't. At the time, I don't look anything like. It's like you just have to. It helped me gain confidence. You know, and get like a little bit of recognition here and there.
Yeah, of course. Like, well, and it was such a big show back in the day.
It was huge.
Well, and like, since you have the insider scoop, what were some of the things that went really, really wrong on a show like that? Was there anything major?
I mean, there's always the stuff. Everything. I mean, I can't. I'd be hard pressed to like try to figure out a day when something didn't go a little bit off. You know, and that's, to me, that's just a testament to the crew of that show, and the minds that work. Like, but the writers were on set. You know what I mean? They were there, and the crew that we had, like, we could adapt to anything. You know, I would say the weirdest thing that ever happened is we were supposed to shoot in this abandoned house. We went into the house. We set up everything. We hid the cameras. Everything is set up. We're good to go. I get a call. They're like, "Where are you?" I'm like, "We're in the house, man." Like, I'm being quiet because I think the bit's about to happen. They're like, "No, I'm in the house. Where are you?" I'm like, "What do you mean you're in the house? We're in that. The house isn't that big. Where are you?" And he's like, "I'm standing in the middle of an empty house." And I'm like, "What?" And I go outside, and we had gone into the wrong empty house.
No.
And set up an entire production and was ready to shoot in an area that we didn't scout, I guess. Like, I don't even know how it happened. I was like,
how were there 2 empty houses in the same place?
Right in the same, and I can't even remember like the area. It wasn't in Hollywood proper. It was like outside. It was somewhere deep in the valley, I feel like.
Where everything's abandoned, apparently.
Yeah, it was just, and the line producer was like, "You have to get out of there." And we had to like pack, we couldn't shoot that day. We had to like pack up and leave and go back to the offices. And the whole time I'm like, how the fuck did that happen? Like, I still, if it was my fault, it was my fault. I just don't remember really because it was so long ago. But that was like the one thing where I was like, Jesus, that's pretty crazy. But we've had guys that didn't want to sign just because
they looked like it. Well, because some people react really bad to stuff like that. I remember the Kanye West episode like it was yesterday. I think I was in high school when that one came out, when he like freaked out and was like taking whatever tape reel that
the music video.
Yeah,
I wasn't there that day. But my buddy Mike did that, and like when I showed up on Monday, I was like, "How'd it go?" Everyone was like, "Oh fuck, dude, it was insane." Because
he was like legit gonna like kill people.
Yeah, no, he was pissed, and like, you know, sometimes reactions are, you're like, yep, that's what I would do.
Yeah.
But you kind of look psycho. But yeah, that's what I would do.
Yeah. I mean, you try to think about it that way, but that's why it's fun to watch people get pregnant.
That's the thing. And then you could watch some people like, I think it was Missy Elliott. Steve Renazizi lost her gold cross jewelry that she had dropped off at this Beverly Hills jewelry store. She came to get it. And he was like, we don't have it. And she was like, there was mirrors all over the store. So she starts looking around. And like she's like, okay, this is a hidden camera show.
Yeah.
She looked at Steve, she goes, you can tell Ashton to come out right now. And Steve's like, and to his credit, to the credit of the people in control room, because I was like, oh, we're busted. I would have just walked out and gone, hey, you got us. But they were like, no, wait. And she ended up standing up on a chair. She put her foot on the jewelry case. She's like, I'm going to put my foot through this if you don't bring out my jewelry and reveal the cameras.
Right.
And he goes, he picks up the phone and goes, if you put your foot through that, I have to call the police. And she was like, and then she starts kind of like, it was an interesting, and I don't mean to single her out or anything, but it's just an interesting, because I've seen this on several people where they think they're convinced it's a hidden camera show. They're correct.
Right.
But they don't know they're correct. They've convinced themselves. But then after a while, if you let it play out, they start to think, oh, shit. Maybe it's not a hidden camera show, and now maybe I'm just being a weirdo. And
now I'm mad again about the thing that you don't have.
Now I'm mad about the thing you don't have, and now I look crazy because I'm talking about cameras, and now I'm like, oh, and your ego starts to deflate because you're like, maybe I'm not worth doing that to.
Yeah.
So shit. Like I made a huge now I feel foolish, but afterward they always like, oh, I knew it. I'm like, yeah, deep down I bet you did, but. What we're going to show is the look on your face where you don't know it.
Right. I also remember the Justin Timberlake one where they took all his stuff.
One of the best. That was one of the first ones we did.
He reacted so good. Like he was devastated, but he just kind of sat on the stoop of his.
The harsh reality of I believe of that one is that somebody in his family handles his money and they don't live in California, and there had just been something where somebody was wiped out by their own parents, and that's what we made it sound like.
Money.
So he was like, so he was kind of. In my opinion, I don't know. I didn't speak to him directly about his feelings.
Right.
But my guess is he was thinking about oh my God, did my family member rip me off?
All my
and all his stuff is being taken out. And then of course we replicated a lot of his stuff and then smashed the guitar. And he was like, what are you doing? And then we started taking his dogs. And look, if anything, that I was a very snobby, opinionated young man,
producer,
angry, but just even as a human, And so I was like, Justin Timberlake can fuck off. I don't like any of that music. I think it's ridiculous. The Mickey Mouse Club, I don't care. But once I started working on that show, and you're like, oh wait, Justin Timberlake is just a guy. He's just a dude. He's a real talented dude.
Yeah.
But he's just a human being who, when it's tough, he was like, what is going on? He was genuinely sad, and I was like, but his comeback from that. When he went on SNL or Mad TV or wherever, making fun of Ashton and the show, I mean, I was like, this dude gets it. To me, he was the first celebrity that I did a 180 on, where I was like, I didn't care about him, and now I'm like, I don't buy his records, but he was great on SNL. He's just a talented guy,
and smart and funny.
Funny.
Now you just can't not like him.
You can't not like him, and he's a dude who immediately was able to make fun of himself.
Right,
and to me. That says a lot about somebody.
You have to be able to do that. I mean, that's my favorite part about working in comedy, period, is plenty of us fuck up. It happens all the time.
Not me.
Jon is perfection. He's the only perfect one. But being able to call yourself out on it is so refreshing. It's nice to just be like, I did that and whoops. That sucked. But did you have role models specifically in comedy when you started, or people that you kind of...
I wouldn't say I immediately... You mean people that I met out here, or just people in general?
Just people that you maybe wanted to aspire to be like?
Well, my dad was always a really funny guy, and I could tell. Excuse me. When watching him tell a story, even if it was a story I'd heard 1,000 times, even if it was a story everyone in the room had heard 1,000 times, he could tell that story, and these people would. They'd be hanging on his every word. They'd be listening. They'd be in, and then the payoff at the end, they would laugh. And I always thought, okay, that guy knows how to kind of entertain, And and most of the time, he was the butt of the joke of the story. Like my dad, it was a self-deprecating. Somehow it became Like he was doing, and then other people, but a lot of times he was okay making fun of himself. And that kind of was the first, and my dad introduced me to Laurel and Hardy and the Three Stooges and Little Rascals at a very early age.
Oh yeah.
So, and that made him laugh. So then I was like, well, that's good comedy because it's making a guy who can make people laugh.
Right.
And then I got, this is unfortunate, but I got really into Bill Cosby.
Yeah. We just talked about that last week with Trenton. Because he was a staple of comedy, and I watched him too when I was growing up.
Me and my brother
time.
had his tapes. We would we'd go back and forth with tapes. We had everything memorized. And then I saw Raw before I saw Delirious. I heard Comedian, and then I saw Raw, and I was like, holy shit! Like Eddie Murphy blew me away. I was like, dude, what? And then I went back and I watched Delirious. And then from him, I was like, shit, maybe I should look into Richard Pryor because his Richard Pryor was dead on. But I was like, but that's a guy, like if that's the guy that influenced the guy I like, then I want to hear.
You need to know
so
his
soon as I saw Pryor, I was like, this dude makes comedy out of his real life, which isn't funny. You could write a dramatic novel about Richard Pryor's life and there wouldn't be one laugh in it if you chose to leave out the fact that he was a comedian. And I was like, this dude is, I appreciated that on a level I didn't understand at the time. And then Carlin was my dad's favorite comic, so I liked Carlin.
Yeah, my dad loved Carlin too.
Yeah, they were the same age, same Catholic school upbringing, the same, and the same. So we were always kind of quoting little bits of that. And then I just think that as far as comedic role models, those were the people I saw that I was like, yeah, I want to be like that. And then once I got to like research more comedy and looked into it more, like, Dana Carvey was the first real comic I ever saw on TV. It was on a show called Turkey Television on Nickelodeon. It was before he was even on SNL. And then SNL was huge for me growing up, like the early 90s, Chris Farley, Phil Hartman.
Mad TV.
Mad TV was big. It came out in college. But I was still always an SNL guy. Like that was really what I focused on more. Always like Bill Murray. Like I love like Fletch, Stripes, Caddyshack, The Jerk.
But Groundhog's Day was my dad's favorite movie.
That's a great,
and we had to watch Groundhog's Day all the time, and it was like our life was Groundhog's Day of Groundhog's Day. Like
that movie is excellent, though.
Always had it on.
Excellent.
It is, and it's like it's. And I loved coming from Second City. There were so many stories of Bill Murray.
Yeah,
like he used to sell. I don't remember the exact story, and I'm probably gonna fuck it up, but he used to sell chestnuts on the corner outside of Second City, and like actually roast people while giving them roasted chestnuts.
Love it.
And like people, like the word on the streets was that people hated him but loved him for it.
Yeah.
Like because he was such a dick, but I just
that's probably where that lounge singer character came from.
Probably. Like it's fucking hysterical. And stories of Chris Farley and stuff and like what he used to do. And he used to like ride by like this like tiny bicycle by all the bars by Second City and then just fall off of it in front of windows and like
get people to laugh. I should
like
add
what a
that.
time. What a time that would have been. Because now it's just flooded with all these improvisers and everybody's trying to be funny so much that it's just not.
Yeah. I will say that I saw Tommy Boy after like a couple, like I want to say a year after it was out. Probably came out in 92. No, it came out in 93, maybe 94. I saw it maybe 96.
Yeah.
95, 96. But anyway, that movie, as soon as I finished watching it, I was like, Chris Farley is from Madison, Wisconsin.
Right.
David Spade is from what? New Mexico, Arizona? I'm like, what?
Yeah.
These two dudes from places that aren't Hollywood, California. Like that, Tommy Boy to me is my generation's Laurel and Hardy.
Totally.
That's way out west. That's Sons of the Desert. That's those two guys. Black Sheep was a classic in my opinion. Those two guys could have continued to make movies as a team forever. You know what I mean? I thought that, but that kind of like knowing about Chris Farley and like learning more and more about him and just being like, oh, I have a cousin who went to Marquette. I went to the same high school as John Belushi.
Yeah.
There's nothing saying that I can't go and do something like that.
Exactly.
You know? So it was very influential. And just the idea that everybody I talked to who had ever had a run-in with Chris just randomly was like, dude, this guy is more excited to meet you than you are to meet him. He is the nicest dude ever. And like, I'm like, dude, that guy's, he should be,
Yeah.
And back then I'm like, you're happy because everyone likes you and you don't realize that there's a little bit more pain that goes into that.
Sure.
You know what
Yeah.
I mean? That's not so even keeled. And And but still, that I would say those were the people that I looked at and were like, yeah, comedy is fucking awesome.
Exactly. Yeah. And like we used to, when we started hearing stories, we started to try to do like funny things around Chicago when I lived there. And my friend used to live above this bar across the street from Second City. And there was one night that we were shooting people with Nerf guns outside of the window. And it turns out you can't do that.
It's illegal. Yeah, it's like shooting someone with a pellet gun or something. They're like,
And it was Nerf, and we thought it was harmless, and it became this huge thing. And we were like, oh, fuck, I guess we can't Nerf people on the streets anymore.
You can still put eyes
Nobody
out.
has a sense of humor anymore. It's not 1996 anymore.
That is true. I mean, when you look at this, the comedy has changed. It's it goes in waves, but it's changed.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, since '96.
It's getting to a cool place where I feel so comfortable in my skin, being in my 30s, and seeing all my other friends kind of come into their own, and like being okay with just talking about their lives and making that funny without trying to like create a joke like you used to do back in the day. And it's like, it's fucking awesome. And I feel like now people are taking more responsibility to be really honest, and like, what a freeing thing.
Yeah, no. I mean, I agree. There's a lot to be said for what's going on now and how it is. There is more. I like what you said. Like the people finding their own voice and then talking about who they are and talking about their lives and making it more conversational and making it more relatable, and still adding. And because when you think about your life, some of your very best stories have their own punchlines. Like you don't need to do anything. You've lived that. You remember it happening. You can just talk about it again and people will laugh.
Yeah.
And I think that when I realized that was really freeing. That was like, oh man, people are interested in stuff that I actually do. Like that I might be going to do, that I do. Like I can make this, even if they don't do that thing, I can make what I did funny enough that they go, yeah, I've seen that. I know what he's talking about.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and somebody had told me this, and this was a cool breakdown, and it made sense. Like life works in only 3 categories. There's things that are not funny now and are never funny. There's things that are not funny now, but are really funny later. And then there's things that are funny now that are funny later. And that's just how it works.
Yeah.
So at least 2/3 of life is going to find funny.
I do think though that when we say not funny now and never will be,
that's a lie.
That's a lie.
I do too.
because even if it's not in our lifetime, never is too long.
Yeah.
And there are, maybe you think the jokes are tasteless, maybe they are tasteless, but there are jokes about tragedies that have happened not that long ago.
Yeah.
That people still tell and that still gets a laugh, and still, it might get a groan, whatever, but like eventually, yeah, everything is kind of funny.
Exactly. Like last night, I have a friend that's in town from New York, and he runs luxury travel in Africa. So he goes to Africa all the time.
Sweet.
So me and his 3 friends who I've met before, we were sitting in his hotel room at the Standard, drinking and telling stories about travel, about all this fucked up stuff we've all done overseas, and like times we almost died, or like times that venomous things have almost bitten him. Yeah. And we were like crying, laughing. And none of it was stuff that any of us experienced together. But I was like, this is amazing. Like you can bond over all these idiotic moments for sure.
For sure. I mean, that's what you find out is like when we were working with Chris Porter, and I said something about running. I go, sorry, dude, I ran long or whatever. And he goes, what, dude? He goes, it's not about what you fucking do up there. It's about this. And he was like kind of motioning to us being in the green room, like, if we can all hang out in here and have an okay time, I know you'll be okay up there. Like it's not, but because a lot of times people with conflicting personalities have to work together, and sometimes that's not always good in the green room. It's not always good. And some people are just real particular, and most people just want somebody easygoing that's just going to smile and do their thing and not be an asshole. And so.
It was a good vibe. You guys were really fun to work with that weekend. So.
Oh, well, Chris is the best.
Chris is really cool.
That dude is,
I've been blessed with really good experiences. So improv, keep booking me with people that are really awesome.
Yeah, I'd have you on my show, but I can't make women work for free.
Yeah,
and they won't pay anybody on my show. I'm doing a show there on August 1st.
It's okay. I totally understand. But I do work for free plenty of times, so I'm not above anything.
No, but driving to Brea for free is a little much.
Driving to Brea for free is a lot.
Down the street is one thing.
So where can people find you coming up?
I will be at the Brea Improv. When is this going to be?
This is going to come out Tuesday.
Tuesday. Okay, yeah. August 1st, I'll be at the Brea Improv. August 5th and 6th, I will be August 7th and 8th. 8th and 9th. August 8th and 9th, I'll be at the Comedy Loft in D.C. I'm going to be at the Ontario Improv September 14th with Chris Porter.
Oh, okay, good.
That weekend. And then I'll be with Dan Cummins at the Dayton Funny Bone. All these, go to www.jonhuck.me is my Facebook or my website that has all my
information.
Stand up on
So
it.
when he can't remember the dates, he goes there and that's how he finds out the dates. What's your social media so people can find you on there?
On Twitter, at JONHUCK, one word. Instagram is JON_HUCK. I have a Facebook fan page, Jon Huck, the number 1. And then on YouTube, it's just Jon Huck.
Yeah, perfect. And I'm NPH Comedy on all social media. You can follow the podcast at Future Role Model. You can follow the comedy studio at Comedy Pop-Up or CPU Podcasts. And we are out.